My name is Isabella. I'm 26 years old, and classic cars have been my obsession since I was 10 years old. I worked 80-hour weeks for 4 years straight to finally buy my dream car, a stunning 1967 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500 in candy apple red. My family always thought my passion for cars was just a tomboy phase, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I never imagined returning from my month-long business assignment in London to find my garage empty and my most prized possession gone. When I asked my parents where my car was, my mother actually smirked and said, "Thanks to your car, Emma finally got the recording contract she always wanted." I burst out laughing, and she immediately bristled. "What's so funny about your sister's success?" Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments if you've ever had family members who thought they could make major decisions about your property without permission. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this family betrayal backfired spectacularly, because trust me, my parents had absolutely no idea what they had just set in motion. My fascination with classic cars began when I was 10 years old. Every Sunday after church, my grandfather would take me to his friend Marco's auto restoration shop. While other kids complained about being bored, I was mesmerized watching Marco and his team bring vintage automobiles back to life. The smell of motor oil, the sound of engines being tuned, the satisfaction of seeing rusted metal transformed into gleaming perfection. It was pure magic to me. "Isabella," my grandfather would say, his weathered hands guiding mine as I learned to change spark plugs. "Cars like these aren't just transportation. They're pieces of history, works of art that deserve respect." I believed every word, especially when Marco showed me his pride and joy, a 1967 Mustang Shelby GT500 that gleamed like liquid fire under the shop lights. The aggressive lines, the rumble of its 428 Cobra jet engine, the way sunlight danced across its perfect paint job, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Someday," I whispered to myself that first Sunday, "I'm going to own one just like this." It was more than a wish. It was a solemn promise I made to my 10-year-old self, one that would drive every decision I made for the next 16 years. My parents, Richard and Carol, never understood what they saw as my unfeminine obsession with automobiles. "Why can't you be interested in dance or art like other girls?" My mother would sigh whenever I came home with grease under my fingernails. My father would just shake his head with barely concealed disappointment. "It's not normal for girls to spend their free time in garages," he would mutter. Their attitude toward my younger sister Emma was completely different. 3 years younger than me, Emma was everything I wasn't in their eyes: delicate, artistic, and interested in what they considered appropriate pursuits. When she showed interest in singing at age 7, my parents immediately hired the most expensive vocal coach in the city. When I asked for advanced automotive classes at 15, my mother scoffed and said the family budget was already stretched too thin. This pattern defined our childhood. Emma got professional singing lessons, expensive instruments, and recording equipment. I got library books about engine repair and weekend jobs to pay for my own tools. Emma got a beautiful dress for prom and professional photos. I got a discount dress from the outlet mall and took pictures with my phone. Emma got a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday. I got a lecture about the value of hard work and a part-time job application. Don't misunderstand me. I loved my sister dearly. None of this was her fault. But the favoritism was impossible to ignore, and it only strengthened my resolve to prove myself through my own achievements. I left home for college with a full academic scholarship, determined to forge my own path. I majored in mechanical engineering while working 3 part-time jobs, tutoring, bartending, and weekend shifts at a local auto shop. Every spare dollar went into my dream car fund, a savings account I had opened on my 18th birthday with a picture of a Shelby GT500 taped to the inside cover. After graduation, I landed a position at a prestigious automotive engineering firm in Detroit. The salary was excellent, but I lived like a student, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates, cooking all my meals at home, and driving a reliable but boring Toyota Corolla that I had bought used. My coworkers spent their money on designer clothes and expensive vacations. I kept my eyes on the prize. 4 years of 80-hour work weeks, minimal social life, and obsessive saving. While my engineering colleagues burned out or moved to easier positions, I thrived on the challenge. My specialty became high-performance engine design, and my reputation in the industry grew rapidly. But every promotion, every raise, every bonus had one purpose: getting me closer to that 1967 Shelby GT500. Finally, after years of searching classic car auctions and collector websites, I found her. A numbers-matching 1967 Mustang Shelby GT500 in original candy apple red, owned by a retired collector in Phoenix who was downsizing. The price, $125,000. Every penny I had saved, plus a small loan I could easily afford with my salary. The day I drove that car home was the most emotional of my life. My grandfather had passed away the previous year, but I felt his presence beside me as I cruised down the highway, the 428 Cobra jet engine purring with raw power. "We did it, Grandpa," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Your little Isabella finally got her Shelby." That car wasn't just a vehicle to me. It was validation of my choices, proof that persistence and sacrifice could make dreams come true, and most importantly, a connection to the grandfather who had believed in me when no one else did. My boyfriend Marcus understood this completely. We had met at a classic car show 8 months after I bought the Shelby. He owned a beautifully restored 1969 Camaro SS, and we bonded immediately over our shared passion. Unlike my family, Marcus respected my dedication and understood why I would rather spend Saturday mornings working on my car than shopping for clothes. For 2 years, that Shelby was my pride and joy. I babied it, drove it only on perfect weather days, and stored it in a climate-controlled garage. I never could have imagined that the greatest threat to my beloved car would come not from thieves or accidents, but from my own family. The call came on a Wednesday morning in March. My supervisor, Jennifer, summoned me to her office with an expression I couldn't read. As I walked down the corridor, my mind raced through possibilities, most of them negative. Was I being laid off? Had I made a critical error on the Morrison project? "Isabella," Jennifer said as I entered, her tone more excited than I had expected. "How's your passport situation?" I blinked in surprise. "Current. I renewed it last year." "Why?" She smiled broadly. "Because I need you in London, immediately." The explanation that followed was career-changing. Our firm had been contracted by Aston Martin to consult on their new hybrid engine technology. The project was worth millions to our company and represented a massive opportunity for whoever led it. Several senior engineers had been considered, but Jennifer wanted me. "This is enormous, Isabella," she continued. "You'd be working directly with their lead engineers at their headquarters in Gaydon. It's a month-long intensive project, but success here could mean partnership track for you." I was stunned. At 26, I was being offered an opportunity that typically went to engineers with decades more experience. This was the chance of a lifetime. "There's just one catch," Jennifer added. "You leave Friday. I know it's short notice, but Aston Martin wants to fast-track this project. 3 days to prepare for a month in England." While I was thrilled about the professional opportunity, my mind immediately went to my Shelby. My Detroit neighborhood had experienced several car thefts recently, and leaving my most prized possession unattended for a month made me nervous. After considering various options, I decided the safest place would be my parents' house in the suburbs. They had a 2-car garage in a quiet, low-crime neighborhood. Despite our complicated relationship, I trusted them to provide secure storage. That Thursday evening, I made the 40-minute drive to my childhood home. Dad was washing his sedan in the driveway when I pulled up, and he stopped to admire the Shelby as I parked. "Still a beauty," he said, running his hand appreciatively along the hood. "Your grandfather would be so proud." Mom appeared at the front door, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Isabella, what a nice surprise. Are you staying for dinner?" I explained about the London assignment and my request to store the car in their garage for the month. "Of course," Dad said immediately. "We cleared out Emma's old furniture last month, so there's plenty of room." "That's wonderful news about London," Mom added, though I could tell she didn't fully grasp the significance of the opportunity. "But a whole month seems so long. Couldn't you come back for a weekend?" I patiently explained that international consulting projects didn't work that way. As Dad helped me move the Shelby into the garage, I gave him detailed care instructions. The engine should be started once a week and allowed to run for 10 minutes, but please don't drive it, I emphasized. The insurance is complicated since it's a collector vehicle. Also, make sure you use this specific car cover. I showed him the custom-fitted cover I had brought. And whatever happens, don't let anyone else near it. Isabella, I know how to take care of a car, Dad said, slightly offended. I've been driving longer than you've been alive. I know, Dad. I'm just protective of this particular car. It means everything to me. That night, Emma joined us for dinner. She had recently graduated with a music degree and was working at a coffee shop while trying to launch her singing career. Throughout dinner, she complained about how difficult the music industry was and how expensive it was to record professional demos. All my friends from college are getting record deals, she sighed dramatically, but I can't afford studio time for a proper demo. The good studios charge thousands just for a few songs. Mom made sympathetic noises and suggested Dad might help with the costs. We're already helping with your rent, Dad pointed out. Maybe you could take on some extra shifts at the coffee shop? Emma's face fell. But then I won't have time to write new material or network with industry contacts. This is such a crucial time for my career. I bit my tongue, remembering my own years of working multiple jobs while pursuing my goals. But I said nothing, not wanting to start an argument before my trip. Before leaving, I arranged with Marcus to check on the car periodically. He lived 30 minutes away, but he offered to drive by my parents' house weekly as an extra precaution. I'll keep an eye on your baby, he promised. Have an amazing time in London, and don't worry about anything here. The next morning, I boarded my flight to London feeling confident that my car was in good hands. I had no idea that my careful planning had just set the stage for the biggest betrayal of my life. The London assignment exceeded all my expectations. Working with Aston Martin's engineering team was like attending a masterclass in automotive innovation. The hybrid technology they were developing was years ahead of anything I had seen, and my contributions to the project were met with genuine enthusiasm from their senior engineers. During my first week, I called home regularly. Mom and Dad assured me everything was fine, though their responses seemed increasingly brief and evasive as the weeks progressed. "How's my car?" I would ask. "Fine, fine," Dad would reply quickly. "Everything's under control here." By the third week, Mom's text messages had taken on a cryptic tone. "Can't wait for you to get home," she wrote. "We have such exciting news to share." I assumed she meant something about Dad's retirement plans or perhaps news about Emma's music career. The project culminated in a presentation to Aston Martin's board of directors. My engine efficiency improvements were projected to save the company millions in development costs while significantly improving performance. As I shook hands with the CEO after our successful presentation, I knew this assignment would transform my career trajectory. "We'll definitely be requesting your services for future projects," the CEO told me. "Your insights have been invaluable." On my final night in London, Jennifer called with incredible news. The firm's partners had unanimously agreed to offer me a junior partnership, the youngest in the company's history. At 26, I would be making more money than I had ever imagined possible. I boarded my return flight to Detroit in the best mood of my life, excited to share my success with Marcus and eager to take my Shelby for a celebratory drive along Lake Huron. The future looked brighter than ever. The plane landed at Detroit Metropolitan Airport at 3:30 p.m. on a beautiful Friday afternoon. After clearing customs and collecting my luggage, I decided to go directly to my parents' house to retrieve my car, rather than going to my apartment first. I was too excited to see my Shelby after a month away. As my Uber pulled into my parents' driveway, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. The garage door was open, and I could see Dad's sedan and Mom's SUV, but no sign of a classic Mustang. Maybe they moved it, I told myself, trying to stay calm as I paid the driver and walked to the front door. Mom opened the door before I could knock, greeting me with a hug that seemed overly enthusiastic. "Welcome home, sweetheart. How was the flight?" "Fine," I said, distracted. "Mom, where's my car?" A strange expression crossed her face, part guilt, part defiance. She avoided eye contact as she ushered me inside. Come in. Your father's in the living room." Dad was sitting in his recliner, but he looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with the newspaper in his hands. He looked up when I entered, his smile forced and unconvincing. "Dad, where's my Shelby?" I asked directly, the knot in my stomach growing tighter. He cleared his throat nervously and glanced at Mom, who was suddenly very interested in rearranging the magazines on the coffee table. "Well, honey," he began, his voice unnaturally high, "something came up while you were gone." "What kind of something?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Where is my car?" Mom straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin in the defensive posture I remembered from childhood arguments. "Emma had an incredible opportunity," she said firmly. "Once-in-a-lifetime chance." I stared at her, not comprehending. "What does Emma's career have to do with my car?" "Thanks to your car, Emma finally got the recording contract she always dreamed of," Mom said, and there was something almost triumphant in her voice. She pulled out her phone and showed me Emma's Instagram feed. There was my sister in a professional recording studio, wearing expensive headphones and beaming at the camera. Another photo showed her signing what appeared to be a contract with a record label executive. The caption read, "Dreams do come true. Just signed with Harmony Records. My debut single drops next month. Grateful talker, dreams come true." The pieces clicked, together with horrifying clarity. "You sold my car," I whispered, too shocked to shout. "Now, Isabella," Dad began in his patronizing tone, "try to understand. Emma was so close to getting her big break. The record label was interested, but she needed to pay for professional demo recordings and music videos. It was a $75,000 investment in her future. So you sold my car," I repeated, this time loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You sold my $125,000 car for $75,000 to fund Emma's music career." "You can always buy another car," Mom said dismissively. "You make excellent money now, especially with that promotion you mentioned." Emma needed this chance. She needed to show the record label she was serious about her career. I felt like the room was spinning. My hands started shaking as the full impact hit me. "That car was registered in my name. You had no legal right to sell it." My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Well, technically," Dad mumbled, "we told the buyer you had authorized us to handle the sale while you were out of the country." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating that I could barely form words. "Do you have any idea what that car meant to me?" My voice cracked with emotion. It wasn't just transportation. It was my connection to Grandpa. It represented 4 years of sacrifice and hard work. It was my dream. "It's just a car, Isabella," Mom said, her tone growing harder. "Family comes first. Emma is your sister." She was struggling with depression about her career. This opportunity was like therapy for her. "And what about me?" I shouted. "Don't I matter? My feelings, my property, my dreams, none of that counts?" "Don't be so dramatic," Mom scoffed. "You've always been the strong one, the independent one. Emma is sensitive. She needs more support. Besides, you're being selfish. This is about Emma's artistic dreams." I laughed bitterly. "Selfish? I worked 80-hour weeks for 4 years to afford that car. I lived like a monk to save every penny. When did you ever sacrifice anything to make my dreams come true?" "That's different," Mom snapped. "You've always been materialistic, focused on things instead of relationships. Emma's dream is about art, about touching people's lives with music." The double standard was so blatant it took my breath away. For a moment, I just stood there, trembling with rage and disbelief. Then a thought occurred to me. "How much did you actually sell it for?" Another uncomfortable exchange of glances. "Well," Dad began hesitantly, "the market for classic cars is complicated." "How much?" I demanded. $75,000, he admitted quietly. I gasped. $75,000? That car was worth at least $125,000. It was a numbers-matching Shelby GT500 in pristine condition. "Did you do any research at all before selling it?" "The buyer said that was a fair market price," Dad said defensively. "We're not car experts. Like you." "You didn't even try to get it appraised properly," I said, incredulous. "You just sold it to the first person who made an offer." Mom crossed her arms defensively. "We had to move quickly. Emma's opportunity was time-sensitive. The record label needed her to start recording immediately." That statement, so casual in its admission of deliberate deception, hit me like a physical blow. They had rushed the sale specifically to present me with an irreversible situation. Who did you sell it to? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Some collector from Ohio, Mom said vaguely. I don't remember his name exactly. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Marcus. Just drove by your parents' house. Where's the Shelby? Is everything okay? And suddenly, in the midst of my anger and heartbreak, a memory surfaced that would change everything. A conversation I'd had with Marcus just before leaving for London, a precaution we'd discussed but ultimately decided against implementing. I started to laugh, quietly at first, then louder. The sound was strange and unsettling, even to me. Mom's face contorted with confusion and irritation. What could possibly be funny about your sister's success? She demanded. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. You want to know what's funny, Mom? You stole and sold a car that wasn't mine. Dad frowned deeply. What are you talking about? We saw you drive it here before you left. I held up my finger, signaling them to wait, and stepped outside to meet Marcus, who had just pulled into the driveway in his Camaro, looking confused and concerned. After a brief explanation, he followed me back inside, equally curious to hear what I had to say. Mom, Dad, I began, gesturing to Marcus. You both know Marcus, right? Of course, Mom said impatiently. Isabella, what are you getting at? I smiled, feeling an odd sense of calm settling over me despite the chaos in my heart. The car you sold wasn't my 1967 Shelby GT500. It was Marcus's 1969 Camaro SS. The color drained from both my parents' faces as I explained the last-minute swap Marcus and I had made for additional security. The day before I left for London, Marcus had brought his Camaro to my parents' house and taken my Shelby to his climate-controlled storage facility. To the untrained eye, both cars looked similar. Classic American muscle cars from the late 1960s, both red, both meticulously maintained. But, my father stammered, it looked exactly like your car. That's because classic muscle cars from that era have similar profiles, Marcus said, his voice cold with controlled anger. But my 69 Camaro SS and Isabella's 67 Shelby GT500 are completely different vehicles. Different manufacturers, different engines, different everything. Oh my God, my mother whispered, sinking into a chair. What have we done? You've committed grand theft auto, I said flatly. You sold property that belonged to neither you nor me. You forged documents, lied to a buyer, and committed fraud. We could go to prison, Dad said, his face ashen with realization. Yes, Marcus confirmed, his voice hard as steel. Auto theft over $25,000 is a felony in Michigan. Add fraud and forgery, and you're looking at up to 10 years each. Mom started crying, loud, dramatic sobs that once would have made me rush to comfort her. Not today. How were we supposed to know it wasn't your car? She wailed. You tricked us. I didn't trick anyone. I corrected her sharply. I made security arrangements for my property because apparently I couldn't trust my own family to respect it. You have to help us fix this, Dad pleaded, suddenly looking much older than his 58 years. We can't go to jail. We didn't mean to steal Marcus's car. Ignorance isn't a legal defense, Marcus pointed out coldly, and neither is family. Loyalty. You stole my car without permission and sold it to a stranger. That's textbook theft. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered hesitantly. Is this Isabella Martinez? A man's voice asked. Yes. Who's calling? This is Robert Chen. I recently purchased a classic Camaro from your parents. There seems to be an issue with the title transfer, and I was hoping we could resolve it quickly. My eyes met my parents, who were watching with naked terror. In that moment, I had a choice to make. I could immediately tell this stranger the truth about my parents' theft, or I could buy some time to figure out a solution that would deliver justice without completely destroying my family. Mr. Chen, I said carefully, there has been a misunderstanding about the vehicle sale. Could I call you back within a few hours? I need to sort out some details with my family. He agreed, and I hung up, turning back to the fearful faces watching me. That was your buyer, I informed them. He's having trouble with the title transfer, Probably because the car is registered to Marcus, not to me or you. Please, Isabella. Mom begged, her makeup streaked with tears. Please help us. We never meant to hurt anyone. Except me, I pointed out. You were perfectly willing to hurt me. We thought you'd understand, Dad said weakly. Family is supposed to help family. Is that right? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Then I guess it's time for you to help Marcus, since you're the ones who robbed him. After stepping outside with Marcus for a private conversation, we stood in the driveway where my Shelby should have been parked, discussing our options in hushed tones. I can't believe your own parents did this, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. Believe it? I said grimly. They've always favored Emma. I just never imagined they'd go this far. Do you want to press charges? Marcus asked. We'd have a slam dunk case. I sighed deeply. Part of me wants to see them face consequences, but I don't want my parents in prison even after what they did. I understand, Marcus said, taking my hand, but they can't just walk away from this either. They need to understand that actions have consequences. What if we handle this privately? I suggested. Make them pay restitution and ensure they understand they can never do anything like this again. Marcus nodded slowly. That could work. But I want a written agreement. And they need to make this right financially. Every penny plus damages for the stress and inconvenience. When we returned inside, my parents were huddled together on the couch, looking like they'd aged 10 years in the past hour. We've been discussing your options, I announced, and they looked up with desperate hope in their eyes. We're willing to handle this privately, but there are conditions. Anything, Dad said immediately. We'll do anything. First, you need to get Marcus's car back from Mr. Chen and refund his money completely, I began. Second, you'll pay Marcus additional compensation for his time, stress, and inconvenience. Third, you'll sign a legally binding agreement never to touch our property again. How much money are we talking about? Mom asked nervously. The car? Sold for $75,000, Marcus said. I want that back plus $10,000 in damages, and I want it within 2 weeks. Dad paled. We don't have $85,000 just sitting around. Then I suggest you figure it out, Marcus said firmly. Because the alternative is criminal charges and potentially years in prison. Where are we supposed to get that kind of money? Mom asked, panic creeping into her voice. That's not my problem, I said coldly. You created this situation. You figure out how to fix it. Over the next week, a solution slowly emerged. My parents would take a second mortgage on their house for $60,000. Emma, when she learned the true cost of her opportunity, would contribute $20,000 from the advance she'd received from the record label. The remaining $5,000 would come from selling some of Dad's collectibles and Mom's jewelry. The hardest part was calling Emma, who was still floating on Cloud 9 about her recording contract. When I explained what had happened, there was a long silence on the phone. Wait, she said slowly. You're telling me Mom and Dad stole someone's car to pay for my demo recordings? That's exactly what I'm telling you. But they said you had given permission. Emma, I was in London. When would I have given permission to sell a car that wasn't even mine? Another long pause. Oh my God, Isabella, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I thought you were being supportive of my career for once. Supportive? I echoed incredulously. When have I ever not been supportive? Well, you've never seemed interested. In my music? Emma, there's a difference between not sharing your interests and not supporting you. I've never tried to sabotage your career or steal from you to fund my own dreams. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Emma slowly realizing how our parents' favoritism had warped her perspective on our relationship. By the end, she was crying and promising to contribute to making things right. The next challenge was dealing with the extended family. Word of the situation had spread, and the reactions were predictably mixed. Most of our relatives sided with my parents, viewing the situation as a family dispute rather than a serious crime. Aunt Patricia called me furious. Isabella Rose Martinez, she began, using my full name like I was still a child. What's this I hear about you threatening to send your parents to jail over a car? Aunt Patricia, I said wearily. They stole a vehicle worth $75,000. This isn't about family disagreements. It's about felony theft. Family helps family, she declared. Your parents were trying to help Emma's career. Can't you just be happy for your sister's success? Would you be happy if someone stole your property to fund someone else's dreams? I asked pointedly. The conversation devolved from there, with Aunt Patricia accusing me of being selfish and materialistic. Several other family members echoed similar sentiments, making me realize how deeply the dysfunction ran in our family system. However, Uncle Miguel, my father's eldest brother, had a completely different reaction. When I explained the situation, to him, he was appalled. "They did what?" he exclaimed. "Isabella, what your parents did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. You'd be within your rights to press charges." His support meant the world to me. Everyone else thinks I should just forgive and forget because we're family. Family doesn't give anyone the right to commit crimes, Uncle Miguel said firmly. Your parents need to face consequences for their actions, or they'll never learn. 2 weeks later, we met at a lawyer's office to formalize the restitution agreement. The lawyer, a friend of Marcus's who specialized in criminal law, had drawn up a comprehensive settlement that protected both Marcus and me while giving my parents a way to avoid prosecution. My parents looked haggard and defeated as they signed the papers. The stress of the situation had clearly taken its toll. Dad had lost weight, and Mom looked like she hadn't slept in days. Emma sat beside them, equally subdued, having had to give up most of her record advance to help fix their mistake. "I want you all to understand something," I said as they finished signing. "This isn't just about the money, it's about respect. It's about understanding that other people's property and feelings matter, even when they conflict with what you want." Mom looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "We know we made a terrible mistake, Isabella. We were just trying to help Emma." "By committing multiple felonies," Marcus interjected. "Let's not minimize what actually happened here." "We understand," Dad said quietly. "And we're grateful you're giving us a chance to make it right." The money transfer took another week to complete, but eventually Marcus received his full restitution. Mr. Chen, the innocent buyer, was surprisingly understanding when we explained the situation and offered him a full refund plus compensation for his inconvenience. The day we went to retrieve Marcus's Camaro from Mr. Chen's garage was emotional for all of us. Seeing the car again, beautiful and undamaged, felt like a small miracle after everything that had happened. "Thank you for handling this the way you did," Marcus said to me as we drove our respective cars away from Mr. Chen's house. "You could have just had them arrested." "They're still my parents," I replied over the phone. Despite everything, I didn't want to destroy them completely. But they needed to understand that actions have consequences. 3 months after the car incident, our family dynamics had fundamentally changed. The crisis had forced us to confront years of dysfunction and favoritism that had poisoned our relationships. Emma's recording career, ironically, had stalled. The record label had been less impressed with her work than initially anticipated, and without the financial cushion of her advance, she was struggling to fund continued recording sessions. But for the first time, she was taking responsibility for her own career rather than expecting our parents to solve her problems. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she told me during a rare phone conversation, "about how I've been expecting everyone else to make my dreams come true, instead of working for them myself. I'm glad you're realizing that," I said. "It doesn't mean I don't support your music. It means I want you to succeed on your own merit." My parents had aged noticeably during the ordeal. The financial strain of the restitution payments, combined with the shame of having their actions exposed to the extended family, had humbled them considerably. But perhaps more importantly, it had forced them to examine their parenting choices and the impact of their favoritism. "We owe you an apology," Dad said, during a stilted family dinner a month after the settlement. "Not just for the car, but for years of treating you unfairly. You always seemed so capable, so independent," Mom added, her voice shaking slightly. "We thought you didn't need our support the way Emma did. We see now how wrong we were." "Everyone needs support," I replied. "The difference is that I learned to be self-sufficient because I had to, not because I preferred it that way." The healing process was slow and often painful. Family therapy sessions helped us communicate more honestly than we ever had before. There were setbacks and arguments, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves. But gradually, something new began to emerge. A family dynamic based on mutual respect rather than manipulation and favoritism. My career, meanwhile, had reached new heights. The success of the London project had indeed led to my promotion to junior partner. At 27, I was earning more than I had ever dreamed possible and working on cutting-edge projects that fascinated me. Most importantly, the experience had clarified what truly mattered to me. While I still loved my Shelby GT500, safely, stored in my own secure garage now, I realized that the car's greatest value wasn't monetary or even sentimental. It had served as a catalyst for necessary change in my family, forcing us to confront destructive patterns that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. 6 months after the incident, I took my Shelby for a long drive along the Lake Michigan shoreline, something I had done countless times before. But this drive felt different. As the engine purred beneath me and the wind whipped through my hair, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for months. The car was still special to me. It remained a connection to my grandfather and a symbol of my perseverance. But it was no longer the most important thing in my life. That distinction now belonged to the hard-won respect and honesty that had emerged from the ashes of our family crisis. When I returned home, Marcus was waiting in my driveway, leaning against his perfectly restored Camaro. "How was the drive?" he asked, wrapping me in his arms. "Perfect," I said, and meant it. Absolutely perfect. Looking back on the whole ordeal, I realized that sometimes the things we value most can become tests of character, not just our own, but those around us. My Shelby revealed truths about my family that were painful but necessary to face. The most surprising outcome was Emma's transformation. 6 months later, she had found work as a music teacher at a local community center while pursuing her recording dreams in the evenings. For the first time, she was supporting herself financially and seemed genuinely happier for it. "You know what's weird?" she said during one of our now regular coffee dates. "I actually feel more confident about my music now that I'm not depending on handouts from mom and dad. When you work for something, yourself, it means more." My parents, meanwhile, had become almost overly respectful of boundaries. Dad would ask permission before borrowing so much as a pen, and Mom had stopped giving unsolicited advice about my life choices. The pendulum had swung far in the other direction, but I preferred it to the alternative. The financial strain of the restitution had also taught them valuable lessons about money management and the real cost of their impulsive decision. They had been forced to downsize their lifestyle significantly, selling unnecessary possessions and cutting back on expenses they had previously considered essential. "We never really thought about how hard you worked for that car," Mom admitted, during one of our therapy sessions. "We saw it as just another expensive toy, not as the result of years of sacrifice and dreams." "That's because you never asked me about it," I replied. "You never showed interest in understanding what it meant to me." The therapy sessions were perhaps the most valuable outcome of the entire crisis. For the first time in my adult life, we were communicating as equals rather than falling into the old patterns of my childhood. Dr. Martinez, our family therapist, had helped us identify and address the toxic dynamics that had poisoned our relationships for years. "Favoritism in families doesn't just hurt the less favored child," she explained during one session. "It also damages the favored child by preventing them from developing resilience and self-reliance." Emma nodded ruefully. "I can see that now. I never learned how to handle disappointment or work through challenges because Mom and Dad always swooped in to fix things for me." The ripple effects extended beyond our immediate family. The incident had become something of a cautionary tale among our relatives, with several family members reconsidering their own parenting approaches. Aunt Patricia, who had initially sided with my parents, later called to apologize after her own daughter pointed out similar favoritism in their household. "I never realized how my actions might be affecting my kids differently," she admitted. "Your situation really opened my eyes." 1 year after the car theft, we held a family barbecue to celebrate Emma's first paying gig as a professional musician, a modest performance at a local festival, but one she had earned entirely through her own efforts. As I watched her perform, that evening I felt genuinely proud of her growth and accomplishments. "She sounds great," Marcus said, standing beside me as we listened to Emma sing. "And she seems so much more confident than before." He was right. The Emma on stage was different from the insecure young woman who had needed her parents to steal a car to fund her dreams. This Emma had worked for her opportunity, practiced relentlessly, and earned her place on that stage. After her performance, Emma pulled me aside. "Isabella, I need to say something. I know I thanked you before for not pressing charges against Mom and Dad, but I don't think I really understood what that meant until now." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You could have destroyed our family. You had every right to be furious and to want revenge. Instead, you found a way to hold everyone accountable while still leaving room for us to grow and change. That took incredible strength and wisdom. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. We're family, Emma. Complicated, dysfunctional family, but family nonetheless. I wanted consequences, not destruction." "I love you, big sister," she said, hugging me tightly. "And I'm sorry it took me 24 years to really see how amazing you are." That night, as Marcus and I drove home in my Shelby, I reflected on the journey we had all traveled. The car hummed smoothly beneath us, its engine as perfect as the day I had first driven it home. But my relationship with this machine had evolved. It was no longer just a symbol of my independence or a connection to my grandfather. It had become a reminder of the importance of standing up for yourself while still leaving room for forgiveness and growth. "Do you ever regret how we handled everything?" Marcus asked, as if reading my thoughts. I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "It would have been easier to just press charges and walk away from my family completely. But that would have been the end of the story. This way, we all had a chance to become better people. Even if it was more complicated and messy?" "Especially because it was more complicated and messy," I replied. "Real healing usually is." As we pulled into my driveway, I noticed a text from my dad. "Saw Emma's performance on her Instagram. So proud of both my daughters. Thank you for believing in second chances." The message was simple, but it represented years of growth and change. The father who had dismissed my interests and enabled my sister's dependency was learning to see and value both of his daughters as individuals. 2 years later, I received an unexpected phone call that would bring the story full circle in a way I never could have anticipated. A voice I didn't recognize asked if I was Isabella Martinez, the owner of a 1967 Shelby GT500. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "Who is this?" "My name is David Rodriguez. I'm calling because I believe I have some information about your car that you might find interesting." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of information?" "Well, I'm a classic car appraiser, and I recently evaluated a Shelby GT500 that matches your car's description." The owner mentioned he bought it from a family in Michigan who needed to sell quickly due to financial difficulties. I frowned. "I think there might be some confusion. My car was never sold." "That's what makes this interesting," David continued. "The VIN number on this car suggests it might actually be a very rare factory prototype. If I'm right, your car could be worth significantly more than a standard GT500. After providing my VIN number and arranging for David to inspect my car, the truth emerged. My beloved Shelby wasn't just any 1967 GT500. It was one of only 12 factory prototypes ever built, making it worth nearly $300,000 rather than the $125,000 I had originally paid. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had tried to sell what they thought was a $125,000 car for $75,000, not realizing they were actually attempting to dispose of a $300,000 piece of automotive history. "Can you imagine if they had actually sold your real car?" Marcus marveled when I shared the news. "They would have given away a fortune without even knowing it." But rather than feeling anger or regret, I found myself laughing. The discovery perfectly encapsulated the entire experience. My family's lack of understanding about what truly mattered. To me, the consequences of their impulsive actions and the unexpected ways that standing up for your principles can lead to positive outcomes. I decided not to share this information with my parents immediately. They were still making payments on the restitution loan, and I didn't want this revelation to minimize the lessons they had learned about respecting other people's property and choices. Instead, I used the knowledge as motivation to establish a small scholarship fund for young women pursuing careers in automotive engineering. Working with my company, we created the Isabella Martinez Scholarship for Women in Automotive Engineering, funded partly by my savings and partly by setting aside money each month based on my car's newly discovered value. The first scholarship recipient was a brilliant 18-year-old named Sophia, who reminded me of myself at that age, passionate about cars, determined to succeed, and completely unsupported by her family's traditional expectations for young women. "They think I should study nursing or teaching," Sophia told me during our first meeting. "They say cars are for boys." "What do you think?" I asked. "I think cars are for people who love them," she replied with a fierce smile that I recognized completely. 6 months later, I finally told my parents about my car's true value. We were having dinner at their house, a monthly tradition we had established as part of our ongoing relationship repair. When I casually mentioned the appraisal results, Dad nearly choked on his wine. $300,000? Are you serious?" "Completely serious," I confirmed. Apparently, Grandpa's friend Marco knew more about classic cars than any of us realized. He sold me a factory prototype without even knowing it. Mom was silent for a long moment, the magnitude of what could have happened clearly sinking in. "We could have given away a fortune," she whispered. "But you didn't," I pointed out, "because you sold Marcus's car instead of mine. In a twisted way, your betrayal actually protected my most valuable possession." Emma, who had joined us for dinner, shook her head in amazement. "The whole situation is like something out of a movie. The wrong car gets stolen, the real car turns out to be worth a fortune, and everyone learns important life lessons." "Life is stranger than fiction sometimes," I agreed, "but I'm grateful for how everything worked out, even the painful parts." As I drove home that evening, my Shelby's engine purring with the contentment of a well-maintained classic, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all to this point. The car that had once represented my isolation from my family had ultimately become the catalyst for bringing us closer together. The road ahead stretched out before me, full of possibilities. My career was thriving, my relationship with Marcus was stronger than ever, and my family had learned to see and respect me as an individual. Most importantly, I had learned that standing up for yourself doesn't require cutting yourself off from those you love. It simply requires establishing boundaries that allow everyone to grow. Behind me, the lights of my childhood home faded in the rearview mirror, but the warmth of the evening's conversation remained. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly seen and valued by my family, not despite my differences, but because of them. The Shelby and I continued into the night, two pieces of automotive history carrying forward the lessons of the past while embracing the promise of the future. And in that moment, speeding along the familiar roads of my hometown, I knew that some dreams are worth fighting for. Not just the dream of owning something beautiful, but the dream of being understood, respected, and loved for exactly who you are. The story that began with betrayal had evolved into something much more valuable. A family that had learned to honor each other's dreams instead of sacrificing them for convenience. And that, I realized, was worth more than any car, no matter how rare or precious it might be.